Of course, we always want the best things in life, right? When it comes to fragrance, food, money, cars, clothes, all of that stuff. And actually, early on in my journey, I was looking for the best niche fragrances, which led me down this rabbit hole of a bunch of niche fragrances ranging anywhere from as low as 80, 70, sometimes even 60 bucks on discounters, which there definitely are some, upwards of like $600 and maybe even a crazy whopping ass 2,000 bucks. That's just ridiculous. But two of the most popular brands that tread in this realm of 60 to $130 on discounters are Mancera and Mancera, sister companies both from France, and both are considered niche brands, and they've both got some pretty good fragrances. Today we're going to be rating the top 10 Mancera fragrances in my collection. I've amassed a collection of over 28 Mancera fragrances, and it's only now that I consider to have at least somewhat of an opinion as to which ones are the best ones. And I think that there's some consistency across the boards in regards to people's favorites as well, which I did consider in this list as well. But for the most part, this is going to be subjective with some objective realities to it, like quality, scent profile, overall mass appeal, and compliment factors in my overall experience. So starting things off with hitting that subscribe button, of course, as always, and a fragrance that's been a staple from the brand, and easily, rightfully so. It's called Cedrat boise. So this is one that I came across when looking for fragrances early on during the Club de Nuit era, the Aventus era. This came up a lot, and there was a stigma around the entire brand, a lot of the fragrances and its sister company Mancera, about the fact that they opened up synthetic. This was one of the first fragrances I got. Actually, I think it is the first fragrance I got from Mancera that completely changed the game for me. I stayed away from it and tread really carefully because of other influencers saying that it opens up harsh, etc. But I found this to be not harsh whatsoever. The scent profile of this is a little bit fruity. It's slightly creamy, even a little frothy, like foamy, without it going a shaving cream realm. Although it does have that oak moss, etc., there's just enough sweetness. I get like this mashup of maybe a little bit of vanilla cream meets some black currant and pineapple. It's this pineapple, woods, and cream fragrance with a base of some style naturalistic sweetness. It's an absolutely, I think, phenomenal fragrance. I give this one, honestly, a 10 out of 10. A pretty refreshing take. When I first got it, I was like crazy about it. I was like, this is like better than Aventus for me right now, because of the fact that I was getting, you guys, I cannot tell you how many clones and smell-alikes of Aventus stemmed off of that DNA. And what this in fact kind of reminded me was like this Ani meets Aventus style vibe. And I love it. I genuinely love it. And if you guys haven't gotten your nose on this, you should definitely get your nose on it, or at least sample it, because it's absolutely the best one from the brand. Longevity's to the next day, and I know that they released recently the Cedrat boise Intense, which I also do have, but I put it on the back seat. Although it's a great one, I think it's gonna be best for the fall and winter time. This one, it's just not as thick. What that one does is it increases a bit of that oak mossy and frothy feel, kind of lowering the versatility, whereas this one already has it, honestly. If you want a thicker scent profile, go for that one, but this, it'll work in those same exact seasons. You can wear this all year round, dress it up, or even dress it down. Although I find this to be at a certain level of sophistication to be more appropriately dressed up, you could signature scent this one. My final thoughts on this, it's a freaking 10 out of 10. I mean, everything. It's got mass appealing factor, compliment factors, freshness, a little bit of a sweetness that's not overly done, masculinity. It's a perfect scent profile you can signature scent. Moving on to the next fragrance, I personally love this one, and it's very unisex. Gentlemen out there that don't like fruity, saffron, and some ginger, stay away from it. The whole baccarat vibe, but fruitier. Needless to say, I've been loving this one. It's called Instant Crush. And one of the best portions or parts of this fragrance is its uniqueness in comparison to all of the other ones in the lineup, basically. I get this undertone of baccarat with much more of interesting factors to it. I personally would rock this one over baccarat any day. It adds an attention-grabbing ginger and some brighter aspects coming from those melody of fruits. I've honestly dressed this one up mostly. I've even worn it during the summertime. It's worked all year round. Signature scent worthy. I do have to emphasize though, this is a unisex, maybe mildly feminine leaning fragrance, but the quality of this is outstanding. Has to be one of the most high-end smelling fragrances from the brand. But if you're a gentleman who enjoys fragrances that are fruity, think herba pura, etc., I believe that you will enjoy this one as well. I'm not saying that it smells like it by any means, but if you take some of those fruity aspects, tone it down a bit, add it with that amber woods, this is what you're gonna end up with. So it's this very sparkling, fresh, and crystallized fruity fragrance. The performance for this one is going to be something that stays on clothing for like 9 hours. It's not really beast mode, and the projection for the first hour and a half is great, but after that, it is more of like an aura. Somebody has to come relatively closer. I'm not gonna say close because it's like 1 to 2 feet. When you're within somebody's bubble, you're gonna smell them, and that's pretty much it. Occasions for this, I've dressed it up. I haven't really dressed it down too much, but I have rocked it during the summertime as a daily scent as well. Every time I rocked it, I always felt like I was just exuding a certain level of class. Next one is pretty new. It's Amore Caffe. It's one of the best coffee fragrances on the market today. Every morning, I have a couple shots of espresso in a latte, basically, and some milk. I love the smell of freshly roasted black coffee. Sure, I add a little bit of sweetener and all that stuff, stuff. But what this smells like is closer to something like a black coffee. The beginning of the fragrance is the only portion where I'm like, ugh, you know, it could have been better. This is truly one of those fragrances where in the beginning it is a little bit harsh in regards to the way that the scent profile for this is. And I personally blame it for the use of the amaretto. The amaretto has this liqueur vibe, but along with this almondy glaze vibe as well. Almond notes can sometimes give this a stale effect or give a fragrance a stale effect, but it's not that prominent in this one. The amaretto does help give you this recreation of almost this glazed coffee bean with this undertone of just it roasting basically without it ever really losing that glazed tone to it. So fresh coffee beans and some roasted coffee in the backdrop is what it smells like to me. The liqueur vibe can be a little bit strong in the beginning, you have been warned, but overall still a great scent profile. I personally believe this one to be unisex, leaning masculine. It has a very rich, bold, and ambery nature that does exude a certain level of masculinity, at least in my opinion. In terms of the performance, this will last the entire day, but please make sure that you're wearing this in cooler weather like the fall and the winter time. It's not going to do the best during the spring and the summertime. It's just not really the most appropriate scent profile. And the way that it is, it's a relatively thicker scent profile as well. Next one is Oud Lemon Mint, some of the people's favorites, and I can absolutely understand why. This is a very different fragrance. Trying to dissect this honestly had me going back and forth, even when making this video. And the reason I say that is because it's a very unusual DNA in regards to the use of oud. I wouldn't necessarily call this a oud fragrance, but it's more so a French twist, or take I should say, on fresh oud. It couples lemon with spices along with oud and amber, but then it also includes this cherry-like almond use, or an almond note I should say. So typically in the Middle East when we use oud, it's not really done fresh. And if it is, it's very different. And especially not animalistic oud. This has absolutely nothing that relates it to animalistic oud fragrances or oud notes. Therefore, I wouldn't really call this a oud fragrance. I would just say that it has this use of a dark ambery wood. Nothing animalistic to my nose at all. And in fact, this opens up like a fresh and spicy ambery fragrance with a cherry undertone. A lot of almond fragrances turn me off, especially if it's overdone, because it can come off metallic. However, with this one, it doesn't come off that way. And so I really did appreciate this only after a couple of wears, and its certain refinement and class was really next level stuff. If you're into a more challenging style scent profile that's glazed, elegant, and sophisticated, you're going to enjoy this one, especially coming from this brand. With that being said, that cherry almond vibe, it's actually really nice in this one, and typically I wouldn't really say that. This doesn't really remind me of many other fragrances, but it does have this certain Guerlain L'Homme Idéal Eau de Parfum vibe, specifically that cherry, a little bit of those ambers, and this one doses it up. I mean, this is definitely a better performing fragrance than something like that. If you like that realm of fragrances, you should absolutely check this one out. The performance for this lasts on clothing for 10 hours easily, and I would say on skin it'll give you about 6 hours. The projection, you're gonna be leaving scent trails more than anything. It's not one that I've been complimented on, and I do find that it'll be more appealing to those of you who are like 25 and up. It does exude a certain bad boy vibe while still holding on to a certain level of refinement. So pretty sexy. I would say that you could signature scent it during the fall and the winter time, or really any time of the year. Overall, it's a pretty damn good fragrance. It's refinement, etc. You could signature scent this, especially to the office, or if you just want that vibe of a certain level of sophistication during mostly fall and the winter time. Can you rock it all year round? I definitely think you can rock something like this all year round. It has a certain level of freshness that'll do just fine. It dries down into something ambery, still retaining onto some of those spices, that cherry vibe, and even getting a little bit naturalistically sweet. It's a good one, deserving of being at number 4. In number 5 place, I love this fragrance, and I think it's underrated, but it's more specific. The reason I say it's specific is because of its use of vetiver. With vetiver, it's a bit challenging for some people. It's either a love it or hate it. And this one has a lot more than just vetiver. It utilizes bergamot, there's orange, there's other citruses like lemon, etc., with a more floral approach to that vetiver, softening it out. So you definitely still get that typical brittle and astringent, almost bitter-like vetiver. However, it's softened out with this use of orchid. For the longest time, I thought it was jasmine, because typically orchid is very pungent and very strong. Couple that with a bit of musk and some spices, and it really tones down any of that fatty and indolic, common waxy nature that you'll get with something of orchid, making this one a very elegant, refined use of vetiver. It's this musky, citrus fresh woods fragrance. That's the best way I could describe this. Musky, floral, citrus fresh, and woody. I think this is an excellent fragrance with just enough of a spice kick to really make this one interesting and not go too soft and feminine. I would personally signature scent this all year round. Although, you know, typical freshies are not the best for the cooler weather, you can still signature scent this, especially to the office, dressed up dates. It's a softer, woodsy fragrance with a certain level of sophistication because of that. This doesn't necessarily remind me of any other fragrances, but it's almost inevitable when you smell a vetiver-based fragrance, you're gonna remember some of the more popular ones, like Terre d'Hermès and maybe even Encre Noire. This is much more elevated than something like Encre Noire, at least to me. That softness, it gives it a certain refinement and an elegance and class to the whole vetiver DNA. In terms of the occasions, so actually, with that being said, if you're looking for a more rugged and masculine vetiver, this is not it. This is definitely more high-end. So So for the occasions and the seasons, I would honestly signature scent this all year round with no problem, dressed up or dressed down. A beautiful scent profile, especially if you like the note of vetiver. Next one, red tobacco. This one's been beaten up by everybody in the community, and I don't think it's right. I think it's a great tobacco fragrance. Sure, in the opening it's very strong and harsh, but I'm sorry, there's just a lot of pussies. That's basically what I think about it, is like, it's a great tobacco fragrance. Yeah, sure, it opens up pretty damn strong and loud, but like, you don't hear people talk about that with interlude, man. And that shit opens up like, my God, bro. But yeah, stop being a pussy. This is a great fragrance. It opens up with some alcohol, sure, but the fragrance is still really sexy and rich. It has Harrod vibes, Carlisle vibes, obviously done to the lowest spectrum of both of those. You've got notes of cinnamon, oud, incense, tobacco, patchouli, vanilla. I mean, there's a plethora of notes, but what this in turn smells like is a very ambery, woody, and incensey style of tobacco. I think this is sexy, period. I would wear this dressed up, dress it down, signature scent during the fall and the winter time. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I'm not even trolling you guys right now. There's so many people that haven't gotten their nose on this, and especially for the price point, it's one of the best tobacco fragrances. It outperforms all of those fragrances as well. So if you're after performance and you can sacrifice the first 2 minutes, unlike some other pussy, then definitely check your nose, or not check your nose, check your, should I check my nose now? Because I mean, a lot of people, no, you check your nose, okay? It's a great tobacco fragrance. Get your nose on this one, guys. Don't miss out. Number 7 had me questioning whether or not it should be on this list because of the hype. Is it actually worth the hype? And honestly, I don't know what it is, but there's like this, it just happens, man. Like when something's overhyped, it almost always gets an unfair advantage. So I try my best to just shadow that, right? Like forget the hype, forget what people are like putting it up to be, and just review it on its own. And that's exactly what I did with this one. Although I'm not innocent of it not swaying me slightly in the beginning, it was after I fully wore it that I understood it and really did start falling in love with this fragrance. So French Riviera strikes me as this salty, citrus, a little bit powdery, and woods fragrance, okay? When it opens up, it's kind of simple, but you do get like this very refreshing and crisp style of citruses, almost like a fresh drink at the beach, basically. That coupled with some ginger, it gives it some mass appeal, and the peppers, it's pretty interesting. As it starts to dry down, you get these coniferous style of woods coming from the use of actual pine, if I'm not mistaken, and there's also that backdrop of vetiver. But shortly after that, it starts to get softened up. You get almost like the sunscreen vibe and something powdery. And I believe it's the coupling of the musk, the tiare flower, and those peppers that's giving me this overall powdery and lotion vibe, which I started falling in love with and actually start to draw resemblances to another fragrance that I spent a lot of money on. However, there are some differences and we'll get to that. So overall, it did turn out to be a really good fragrance. And typically speaking, I don't like salty shit. It comes off on my skin like literally salt, almost like BO. Like, bro, you spent the entire day at the beach and you need a shower. That type of skin scent. And almost like wet dog. I don't know, it's weird, okay? And that's why initially, like, I was like, oh, this is very salty, but it actually did something really nice. That tiare flower along with the musk kept it relatively clean and gave me that sunscreen vibe the entire day. It has to be worn during the summer and the springtime to really understand this fragrance. When I wore it, it was 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was later in the dry down that I fell absolutely in love with this. And it reminded me of one of my most expensive and truly loved fragrances, City of Stars. It gives me that same use of tiare flower, which that is known to have as well, the same aquatic vibes as well. With this one, however, drying down to be much more of just a salty aquatic and woods fragrance, whereas City of Stars still holds on to that fresh citrus and that tiare flower, giving me that sunscreen vibe. This one is like getting City of Stars on a budget. Kind of in its own direction as well, because this one does dry down into more salty woody than it does the whole powdery and musky, but still, it's a beautiful scent profile. It really is. I don't know if I'd spend over $150. Honestly, I probably would. Not gonna lie, I would probably buy this again, but it's a very specific scent profile that you have to wear during a specific season. So generally speaking, freshies, I'd say you could signature scent and wear all year round. But for this one, just so you don't misunderstand it or have a bad experience, it's gonna be summertime and spring only. And that's pretty much it, man. French Riviera actually smells really damn nice. Even for those of you who don't shower and try to just wear fragrance to cover it up, please shower. God. Typically they, like, I don't know. I think I have like some kind of forgotten memory of somebody who just stinks and always tried to wear freshies to freshen them. That happened. That actually happened. There's a lot of people like that. And if you're one of those, I forgive you. Please shower. All right, moving on. Next place is Tonka Cola. Nostalgia for whatever the reason. I have no idea, but it reminds me of Christmas. It reminds me of Christmas and Thanksgiving. I don't even celebrate Christmas, bro, but like when you live in a country where everybody celebrates it, it just makes you feel jolly and shit. So gingerbread cookies, spiced cinnamon, apple pies, and cola, raspberry, or not raspberry, what is it called? Root beer floats. That's just what this reminds me of. Forget the notes. Honestly, forget the notes. I'm not even gonna be talking about the notes for the most part of this one. It just reminds me of like root beer floats, sodas, colas, gingerbread cookies, shortbread cookies, all in one. More so towards the cola vibe for sure. It's almost like a photorealistic recreation of some kind of soda. Very nostalgic, very different. It's not going to be something that's like you're wearing for compliments. It might pull compliments because it's very different, but just the overall creativity of this scent profile is phenomenal. I personally haven't smelled anything like this. If you have, please do let me know down in the comment section. I'm not talking about clones. Let me know if you know any of other or of any other fragrances that kind of smell like this. So in terms of the performance, it'll last all day, but you absolutely have to rock this one only during the festive season, or more appropriately, I would say, sorry, is going to be the fall and the winter time. Don't let that restrain you though, because I'm an avid believer of wear what you want when you want. Just if you want the best and most appropriate seasons, absolutely going to be those two that I mentioned. Moving on to the next one was a pleasant surprise. Initially, I was just like, oh, okay, you know, that wasn't really that crazy, but I let this one sit, and I swear to God, it got better after 3 weeks. And I know that that's usually a stigma around clones and fresh fragrances, but it was the case with Silver Blue. Initially, I got a mush of a fragrance. I didn't really get too much with this one, but as I let it sit and finally wore it, I would say about a week before making this video, it revealed itself to be something that's actually pretty damn sexy. It kind of reminds me of like this tobacco, a little bit sweet toffee, some spices, maybe even an undertone of amber. And the one thing that really stood out after I let it sit was this note or use of cardamom spice. That wasn't there when I initially got it. When I initially got this, it was just like a blend of like spice and sweet. It was strange. It wasn't bad, but it's much better now. And in fact, this actually reminds me of something that I would personally wear during the cooler weather when I'm wanting to exude a certain level of sophistication, class, and exotic nature. Kind of like something of Blazing Mr. Sam by Penhaligon's, or Blazing Mr. Sam. That's what it is. So yeah, it reminds me of that. But truth be told, this is richer than that. This is denser than that and sweeter than that. It utilizes a note of caramel, if I'm not mistaken, that takes it into a different realm. If you want something stronger than Blazing Mr. Sam that's different enough, this is a really good one. With that being said, it does take this one to a little bit more of a richer and robust ambery sweet base fragrance. So if you like the lightness of Mr. Sam, although it does have a lot of oriental edges and etc., it's still relatively light and diffusive. So if you like the diffusivity of it, and I would argue and say that it does give it a certain level of sophistication because it's not too prominent. It's not in your face and like asking for attention. I would say this one is denser, it's sweeter, and although it asks for attention, I think it's sexier. That's it, plain and simple. I definitely think it's sexier with a certain loss of refinement. So that's the last thing and important thing I wanted to mention. There's a certain level of refinement that's lost because of that. And I would assume that adding more notes, adding more sweetness would kind of give it like this potential to get cloying effect that kind of lowers or adds a synthetic vibe to it. That's what I'm trying to say nicely. It's a bit more synthetic than Blazing Mr. Sam. It's definitely more synthetic than Blazing Mr. Sam, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Overall performance for this one, it lasts all day on clothing, so I would say about 10 to 12 hours, and on skin, it gave me a solid 7 to 8 hours. The projection for this one is great for like 3 hours, and it's even one that I got compliments, and I would personally say it's that sweet caramel and cardamom that really took the win for me. So one of the newest ones added to my collection, for it to land on this list is a pretty big deal. Silver Blue, although it's really nice, not the most spectacular thing in the world, that's why it's in the most appropriate place for this list. Last but not least, one of their newest ones, it's Eternal Wood by Mancera. There's one reason why it's this far down, and it's because this is one that also has a synthetic nature to it. It's extremely strong, and I would say that the synthetic vibe is coming from like this spiced oak moss. This has a very sweet base of that toffee. There's also some brittle woods like Palo Santo, spiced up with a lot of saffron and what seems like this spicy oak moss. And so a lot of that is very strong all at once, and it kind of comes off a bit harsh. It definitely does come off a bit harsh. And what it reminds me is a combination of like the sweet oud incense saffron combo that I get from something like Haultain with that spice oak moss vibe that I get from Sauvage Elixir. That whole aromatic fougere or barbershoppy spice, basically Sauvage Elixir. Starts off with that oudy sweet saffron spice, Haultain, and dries down into much more of that oak moss and basically oak moss Sauvage Elixir. That's what I get from this. I don't find it to be an exact of either of those. It's extremely strong and loud, and it does come off pretty harsh. So if you don't mind, you like a beastly ass fragrance that's rugged, this is exactly that. It's a rugged fragrance. I wouldn't necessarily say harsh, it's more so on that rugged side of things. Performance for this one is eternal as the woods in the fragrance as well. It's gonna last to the next day on clothing and on skin. Good luck scrubbing this shit off, pretty much it. I didn't necessarily want to scrub it off, but it was like, holy smokes, Neeb, you're normally spraying this like 12 times. You can't do it with this one, bro. You cannot. You should have stopped at 7. You definitely should have stopped at 7. I wished I stopped at 7, but it was too late and there is no scrubbing it off. So I sprayed it a little bit too much. You have been warned. It's not necessarily that it gets too strong. It's just that the scent profile is already pretty rich and robust in nature that if you spray it anymore, it can definitely be too much. Now we got sirens in the back. They must have smelled the eternal wood. Too much fire, I know. They recognize. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the top 10 Mancera fragrances in my collection. I went for the most mass appealing, the most, famous and popular Mancera fragrances. And I think that Mancera has great fragrances, especially on discounters, which you can find all down in the description for authentic, real Mancera fragrances. There are fakes of everything in the market. But aside from the fact, all things considered, they're not as synthetic as a lot of people have led me to believe personally. I would say that the most synthetic of the lot would be probably these 3 fragrances. Aside from that, and maybe even Instagram. Okay, shit, yeah, maybe we are. But still, that's not bad though. You're talking about a total of 29 fragrances, and these are all fragrances that I love rocking. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on this list. There are 3 more fragrances that I want to give you guys just as a little added bonus for rocking with me. I love you guys. Make sure to subscribe. These are fragrances that are also good. They just didn't make the cut, and we're just gonna keep it really brief. Aqua Wood. Aqua Wood is also another great fragrance that reminds me a little bit of French Riviera, except for the fact that it's not as salty or as standout. It has a lot of similar accords, something floral, powdery, and even aquatic, obviously, and woody, except it's not as rich in each of those scent profiles. It smells like a more safer approach towards something like this. However, this still does place me in that same vein of City of Stars by Louis Vuitton. It has that cask cologne vibe, a little bit of these citruses, maybe a melon, aquatic, and it stays relatively aquatic and woody without going too salty. So kind of giving you what French Riviera does without it being as standout, as punchy with that salt accord. It's a good one, but it didn't give me the total longevity that I personally wanted for it to be on this list. And that's what I think about Aqua Wood. Still a good one. Next one, I don't know how I feel about it, honestly. This is strange. So this is one that I actually took notes for because it was just weird. And I actually put a lot of work into a lot of these lists. In fact, I sit down the week prior to just gathering all of my thoughts. So with Oud Blue Notes, I remember saying that it's weird, but it's not bad. It's got fruity, powdery woods and leather. That's how I summarize this up. And that's not really the most common scent profile if you think about it. You have something fruity and then leathery, but then you also have woods and powder. It's unusual. It's not a bad fragrance by any means, and it adds like this certain level of freshness at the top, drying down into something more ambery and woody, and even gave me a little vibes of something like Oud Lemon Mint, but not fully. So I just think that overall, if I wanted a scent profile, I want something more decisive, and that's usually why you're watching these lists, because you don't want something where it's like middle of the road. Like, just tell me, bro, like which one's better? Is this good? Is that good? So in general, if I wanted something that does Oud Lemon Mint, I'll just get Oud Lemon Mint. And if I want some of that fruity aspect and fresh, I'd get one of the other fruity and fresh aspects. Still a good fragrance, just not one of the best. Lastly, this is called Soleil d'Italie. And the reason why it didn't make the cut, although a beautiful scent, the opening is magical. It's this fresh citruses, naturalistic smelling and florals. It gets old. It really does get old. And as it dries down, it starts to become a little bit cloying, or not cloying, I should say synthetic. It almost reminds me of other very consistent citrus fragrances that end up feeling like an ice pick to the brain. Some of the synthetics start to shine as those florals start to kind of dissipate. And typically speaking, if you want the freshies to last, you need a lot of synthetics, ambroxan, etc. And that's kind of what ends up happening in the dry down. Now, in comparison to some of those other fresh and citrus forward fragrances, if you're thinking of something like Atelier Colognes, Orange Sanguine, etc., this is a softer approach towards that. And I would place it in a similar but more floral realm, even having some feminine traits to it. However, as it starts to dry down, and as with many of these, they start to dry down, it just becomes an ice pick to the brain if you're not sweating it off. So I think it'll do good in the summertime. I still think it's a good fragrance, but if you're not going to be active or going into the beach, it can definitely lean and start going into a synthetic realm. And it doesn't really have anything as outstanding as some of these other fragrances mentioned before. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a pretty big list, pretty big video. If you made it this far, leave a like, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for tuning back into AROMATIX. My name is Neeb. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.